Hi, everybody. Okay, so it looks like I'm live. Okay, awesome. So, hi, everyone. My name's Allie, and I'm the owner of Star Song Reiki and Astrology. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about eclipses. I have been working with eclipses for probably over 20 years now. I was born a few days after a new moon eclipse, and I started to pay attention, I guess, because it felt like major transformations were happening in my life, and they were perfectly timed with eclipses. I was in my 20s and I was just kind of interested in astrology. And it really started to get my attention because I was going through major changes. And every time I was going through a major change, like moving out of state or when I met my first husband or when I had my first baby, when I got divorced, all of those things were happening in perfect timing with eclipses. So I couldn't ignore it. It was just like right in my face. And astrology is a lived experience. Astrology is the cosmos experiencing itself through us, and then how we choose to uniquely express those energies. So I often say, astrology is more than just us learning it on a piece of paper, right? It's also us living it, and it's a partnership. And so I actively started working with these eclipses as a form of partnership from the very, very beginning of my studies of astrology. So I love to share what I've learned along the way with people. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little presentation set up here that I have been working on. Okay, awesome. So the winter 2020 eclipses. Okay. In ancient times, eclipses were both highly revered and somewhat feared. Now, back when the ancient people would study the stars, it was usually only the highest nobles, the kings, the chiefs, and their closest advisors that had information around what the stars were doing. And oftentimes it was told that there was a great dragon in the sky and that dragon would come and swallow the sun. And the only people who knew when this was going to happen were the leaders. And so the townspeople or the farmers or the merchants, on the day when this would happen, it really did create a sense of awe, or even mixed with like fear and reverence of, wow, like this event is taking place. This is a really special moment. Eclipses can herald times of great change or milestones in life, and they can bring unexpected twists of fate or fortune. They can symbolize both a rise to power or a fall from grace. During an eclipse, the sun, the moon, and the earth come into a straight line. So let's talk about what that looks like. So here's a really good graphic. You have the sun, you have the earth, and then you have the moon. You can see that all three are in a straight line. And the moon is in her orbit, and she goes around like this. And she is in direct line with the earth, which is blocking the light of the sun from the moon. And part of the reason why we have an eclipse is because of this shadow here. And that has to do with the nodes of the moon, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Now, 2 weeks later, so for this first one, this is going to be a full moon lunar eclipse. In order for the moon to be full, it has to be opposite the sun. That's always the case. The full moon is always opposite the sun. During the full moon lunar eclipse, the earth is in between them. Okay, that's what makes it an eclipse. 2 weeks later, because the moon has traveled along her orbit, you have the new moon. And that's a total solar eclipse, because what happens is the moon is in between the sun and the earth. And this shadow here that's cast upon the earth, this is what you would call the totality. So that's how the earth, the sun, and the moon line up for there to be an eclipse in the first place. And the moon would continue to orbit around, right? And then 2 weeks later, sometimes you have 3 eclipses in a row. And you'll see that there'll be another full moon eclipse over here 2 weeks later. That's what we had back in June and July. We had 3 in a row. Okay, so eclipses are a time when the light is obscured or blocked. If you were sitting on the earth and looking up at the sky during a full moon lunar eclipse, this is what it looks like. And if, so let me go to the next slide. Our connection to the sun and the moon are temporarily cut. So here we have what it would look like if you were sitting on the earth and looking up into the sky during a total solar eclipse. This is what you see when you're in the totality. And this is the moon moving across the surface of the sun, in between the earth and the sun. Although eclipses sometimes bring the unexpected, we can work with them consciously. We work with what we do know. Okay, so we're going to have information because we have so much information available to us at this time, but the information that we're going to know is the nodes of the moon. We're going to know the house that's involved in the eclipse, and we're going to know the timing. And this information is how you empower yourself to be working with it consciously and to be in partnership with it. It's like the difference between, you know, walking into the ocean and you're not quite past the breakers yet, and you turn to look the other way and a wave kind of catches you and rolls you, right? Versus seeing the wave coming, diving through the wave, or even better, being past the breakers and deciding which wave you want to ride in. So those are how you can kind of work with these energies. You can be completely unaware of it and it can knock you sideways, or you can be aware of it, know when it's coming, know what themes might present themselves, and then kind of ride the waves as they appear, as they arise. So let's talk first about the nodal axis. The nodal axis is going to give us a ton of information about what the eclipses are going to be about. So the nodes are a powerful axis of fate. This is the focus of the transformation. The nodes of the moon. This is, so there's the north node and the south node. There's always an oppositional polarity inside of the eclipse. And the nodes are going to give us the information about what that polarity is. The north node, which would be the head of the dragon that we talked about earlier, is a place of increase. It's a place of hunger or desire. It's a point of moving towards something. It can represent drive or ambition. It denotes an upward movement, an increase in energy, and it oftentimes will bestow a special strength or a blessing. And the south node is the tail of the dragon, and this is a place of release or shedding or surrender. This is a point of moving away from something. It can represent a challenge or a difficulty. It denotes a downward movement of energy or a decrease of energy, and it can reflect an area of potential vulnerability. So we get a ton of information about the north node and the south node. I've heard the south node described as a leaky bucket. And like, I mean, if there's holes in the bucket, it doesn't matter how much water you pour into the bucket, it still will leak and empty. And that's very much the energy of the south node. And then the north node, you have like this hunger, and it's like an unquenchable thirst. It's like no matter, like you just can't be satiated. You just want more. There's just an increase in a hunger and a desire. So the nodes north and south are always going to happen inside of a polarity in the zodiac. And the polarities are the opposite signs. So for example, we've had this full moon lunar eclipse in Gemini, and then we had the we'll have the new moon total solar eclipse in Sagittarius. They're opposite signs. The nodes are always in opposite signs. And so we're going to look at the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius for this particular set of eclipses. Gemini is a mutable air sign. So right away, we know that it's mutable. It likes change. It can be restless, and especially Gemini and Sagittarius, they do struggle with boredom or restlessness. They love change. It's an air sign, so we know that it's more about the intellect and exchange of ideas and logic. And it's ruled by Mercury. And Mercury is the messenger of the gods. He's known for his swiftness in his movements, and then also as a trickster. Gemini as a sign is known for intellectual rapport and exchange of ideas, and loves to explore the world through curiosity and movement. It loves to learn new things, but learning the new things is not enough. It then has to chat about or tell people about what they've learned. And they're very fun-loving, changeable, quick, witty, and curious. Now, the opposite sign of Gemini is Sagittarius, which is a mutable fire sign. So again, we see change is a major theme here. And fire is going to be more about enthusiasm and passion and courage and the spirit moving through intuition. It's ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter is a planet that denotes expansion and growth and sometimes even luck. Sagittarius loves the big picture perspective. It talks about faith and philosophy and universal themes. It sees life as an adventure or a journey or a quest. The word quest is inside of the word question, right? So the Sagittarius and Gemini are both idea-oriented signs. Gemini is a little more focused, and then Sagittarius is more big picture. Sagittarius is highly intuitive with lofty goals and visions, and it learns through experience and exploration. So, a question to consider: how are these transforming for you? Exploring faith and beliefs, writing and teaching, education, and travel. And we can see the last two just in the collective, how much education is going through major transformation, and also travel has been going through major transformation since we entered into this nodal axis of Sagittarius and Gemini. We entered into the Sag-Gemini nodal axis. I want to say the eclipse was June 5th. I think we first entered into the Sag-Gemini nodes in May, early May. And that's right around when, I mean, it was a little earlier than that, but travel has been going through some major transformations, as has education as well. Okay, so the next thing we know is house. So the eclipses activate an area of your chart or your life, and that's going to be what provides the narrative over the period of time that the eclipses are in those two signs. So you want to look to the house placement of Sag and Gemini in your chart. Let's give a couple of examples here. So if Sagittarius is in the first house with Gemini in the seventh, you're going to look for changes in relationship status, marriage, or divorce. That is seventh house energy, and these are just possibilities. There could be someone who comes into your life or someone who leaves your life, because the eclipse is very much about out with the old, in with the new. And then there could also be a potential rebirth or a change of identity. That's speaking more to a shift around first house energy, whereas the relationship status is speaking more to a shift around seventh house. But it's going to be somewhere in that axis, first house, seventh house. If you have Gemini in your 11th house and you have Sagittarius in your 5th, right? Because they're always opposites. You're going to look for changes in dating life, creative projects, and children. That's going to bring in the 5th house energy. And you're going to look for changes in social circles, friendships, and maybe like the tribe beyond your family, your larger community. So those are just a couple of examples of how it might show up specifically in a chart. Now let's talk about timing. So eclipses happen every 6 months along the nodal axis for about 2 years. Now, this particular set of eclipses, the first one was June 5th in Sagittarius, and the last one will be in late, I'm going to say November, December of 2021. So this one is really about a year and a half, 18 months instead of 2 years. It's a little shorter. Now, there's a period of time between either the new moon, so the eclipse portal is going to start either with a full moon or a new moon. And 2 weeks later, you're going to have another eclipse. That's just, it always happens that way. This particular one started with a full moon eclipse on November 30th, and 2 weeks later, you have the new moon eclipse. Back in June, it was a full moon in Sag, new moon in, I think it was full, well, we'll look. I'm going to show you a slide in a second, and we'll talk about it. But regardless, that 2 week period is called an eclipse portal. This is a very potent time for change. There can be a lot of out with the old and in with the new. All right, so let's actually, so it was, yes, okay, so it was Sagittarius, June 5th. We had, these are the eclipses of 2020. Look how many eclipses we had in 2020. We had 6. It's a lot of change. That's a lot of out with the old, in with the new. And there was another eclipse on, a solar eclipse on December 26th, 2020, just 5 days before the new year. So I would even include that. It's kind of like part of the eclipse portal of this January eclipse time. So just a ton of change this year. And back in June is when we first were introduced to the Sagittarius theme. And then we had, so that was a full moon, then we had a new moon, then we had a full moon. And here we have a full moon and then a new moon. So, and let's look at 2021. We only have 4. See the difference? I mean, it's just, you can see the, almost, I want to say pile up. Might not sound very positive. So I'll change it to the tremendous amount of change that has been moving through the cosmos in 2020. And these are just the eclipses, right? So in 2021, we only have 4. And you can see that the Taurus Scorpio themes are going to enter in November of 2021. So, you know, we'll be in the Sag Gemini thing for another year, and then we're going to start to move into the Taurus Scorpio thing. So let's talk a little bit about November 30th. We had a full moon eclipse at 8 degrees Gemini, and then we'll have one December 14th in 23 degrees Sag. So if you have any planets that are at 8 degrees Gemini or 23 degrees Sag, or any of the mutable signs at those degrees, so it would be Gemini, Sag, Pisces, and Virgo, then you're going to feel the eclipses a little more potently than people who have planets in other signs. And then next year, the degrees of the most powerful change will be 5 degrees of Sagittarius, Gemini, Pisces, or Virgo, and 19 degrees Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, or Virgo. So it's a good idea to just kind of like look at your chart and take note. All right, I know I have Sagittarius in this house, Gemini in this house, Pisces in this house, and Virgo in this house. Do I have any planets at these degrees? 8 degrees, 23 degrees, 5 degrees, 19 degrees. And like within a, say if we're working with the ones that's coming up, 23 degrees of Sagittarius, you want to give it about 3 degrees. So anywhere from 20 degrees to 23 degrees, from 23 degrees to 26 degrees. Any planets in those mutable signs within 3 degrees of 23, they're going to be touched, right? They're going to be really activated through the eclipse. So let's see. Anything else want to be said about that? So, you're going to look at your chart. And you're going to say, okay, these houses are being touched. These planets are being touched. Here's the timing. So as changes come, it's like you're reading the book in front of you. Essentially, you're reading the energy. You're reading it instead of being like, what's going on? Why is this happening? You're just right in it. You know it. You don't have to feel happy inside of it. There's nothing that says that you have to be happy when these eclipses are going on. Sometimes it's really challenging. It's more about matching the energy. It's like I like to think of astrology as like a partner dance, like a ballroom dance. If the universe is coming towards you with a paso doble and you're doing a jive, it ain't gonna work. You know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, this is a paso doble. I'm gonna be strong and powerful in this dance. Or say it's a tango, I'm gonna be like sexy and hard to get in this dance or whatever. The important thing is that you match the energy so that you're understanding and partnering it and letting it move through in a really conscious way. And you'll have the timing, so as it shows up, you can kind of say, oh, okay, this is the song, this is the dance, this is how I'm moving through it. Okay, so we'll finish with a couple of journaling questions for you. How have the eclipses shown up in your life? How have the eclipses shown up in the world? Just write down what you've noticed. You might want to consider, again, the themes that I mentioned earlier: education, travel, your own philosophies and beliefs, how you're sharing your philosophies and beliefs. What's your relationship like with words right now, and philosophy and faith, and how are you sharing those things? How are you getting your messages out? So what is flowing into and out of your life? That's going to give you a lot of information about how the eclipse is personally working with your life force. So if you have, all of a sudden, you receive an email from an old boss, like 3 days before an eclipse, and they're like, hey, I'd like to bring you in for this possible interview. That's something that's flowing in. And that's how the eclipse is presenting itself to you. Or you might have an opportunity to move out of a place that you've been living, and it's like you're flowing out of one situation into another. That is very, very common during eclipse time. So you might ask yourself, what's the big transition that's happening for you? And again, if you have those mutable signs around 8 degrees and 23 degrees, this time of November and December 2020 is huge change, big change. Don't hold on. If there's something that wants to go, let it go. Don't hold on. It's not the time to grip. It's the time to flow. I love this question. What has changed the most? And I love this question even more. What has remained? I think that's really important. I think the essential stuff always remains. So, and I'll end with a positive, hopeful quote. What the caterpillar calls the end, the rest of the world calls a butterfly. And that is my presentation for you on eclipses. I've been working on that for a couple days, and I usually give this presentation every time we go through an eclipse, and I just update it. Again, it's just a really powerful time for change, and it's better to dance with it than to resist it. I am available if you want to talk about your chart and how these eclipses are showing up for you and how you might be able to work with them consciously. Please reach out anytime. And in the meantime, I hope that everyone's well. Namaste.